Here we go. Welcome everyone to Series 5, Summer School 2020. So this is the time typically in the year where people look for a good book to tuck into. So what a perfect time of the calendar to have a think about how can I disrupt my thinking, get some fresh air to my brain and have a think about what can I apply in these extraordinary times to at the start of the decade kick off in the best possible way forward. So without further ado, let me share the screen. Here we go. So we thought it might be cool with the Lunch and Learn, given it's a summer school, to kind of base it almost along the idea of a business book club. So these sessions are being designed to inspire a positive future vision by focusing on best-selling, groundbreaking book. So it's a 6-part series, 6 books, we'll pick off one a week. And this week, what a perfect book to lead with, excuse the pun, Humankind. And the topic for today is going to be leadership that is fit for the 2020s. If you haven't read this book already, I found it life-changing. And so the hope for this particular session is we'll have a look at, well, why is that important in the first place? The thinking about leadership. What might be some key disruptive thoughts that we can pick out from this book, and what might that mean moving forward in terms of putting it into real life? So much has changed. For many of us, it might feel like we're sort of starting work again. So how do we do that? In a short space of time, we've seen massive transformation in how we work. For many of us, this phase has represented a turning point in our careers, whether returning, seeking, reconsidering options. So learning new ideas and perspectives boosts our energy, confidence and optimism, which are 3 things we probably all would like to have at the moment. So how empowering it would be to step out after this summer with some fresh thinking and vision, focusing on all the things that we can do rather than can't, to work well in the 2020s. Because you're never too young to lead and we're never too old to learn. So in Series 5, I'm going to take a future-focused, really strategic approach on 6 topics that are likely to be instrumental for working well in this decade. Leadership, which is today's, resilience, careers, culture, teamwork and communication, all with the view to have a think about how we can disrupt our thinking and get some fresh air to have a think about how do we really make that topic fit for this new decade. So Humankind, A Hopeful History. This 30-minute Lunch and Learn is a chance to reflect on what can I do to make my leadership or the leadership I see around me fit for the 2020s? Personally, I found this book unputdownable. I just couldn't stop reading it. It gives a completely different and actually a hidden view on human nature. I'll explain more later, challenging much of certainly what I assumed was facts about how people work together. Even as I was reading the book, by the first chapter, I felt lighter, I felt better about life, and much more excited about the changes that we have an opportunity to put into place, as opposed to kind of ground down by the enormous weight of it all. So taking inspiration from this book and what it can mean for leadership, we're going to look at 3 very simple objectives. What is the role of leadership in the 2020s? So what might be some trends and some outlooks, and what might that mean for us? The book in a nutshell, so 5 disruptive thoughts, certainly what disrupted my thoughts, and what might mean for a fresh perspective for leadership. And then just some very simple practical ideas of bringing these fresh air ideas to life with optimism and confidence. So a gentle reminder from nature on thriving in rapid change. There's a lot of 4-letter words beginning with F you might have found yourself saying over the last couple of months. Well, I've got a new one for you. It's time to flux it. So in times of flux, the definition of that is it's more than flex. Flux is where everything is in flow. Nothing is set yet. Everything is in flow. So now is absolutely the time that it's going to be easier for us to channel the fox part of ourselves rather than the panda. So very quick reminder, panda is probably the last to know that something is about to change because it's so busy chomping away on its old ways of working. It can't handle diversity. All it can do is sit there and eat bamboo. And it's a very inefficient way to lead its life, very sadly for the panda, because its choice of food is really low in value. So it has to eat for 18 hours a day just to survive the day. So it is the last to know that there's something happening over there that potentially is going to disrupt the way it can live successfully. Whereas a fox can change overnight. From a hunter to a forager, doesn't matter how it's been raised, it is inbuilt, adaptable, and can flux it up if there needs be. So these unprecedented times require us to set some brand new professional precedents that are so beyond flexible. I mean, agile has been on job descriptions for at least a decade, so the need to be agile is not new. So there's something that almost I certainly needed a new language to be able to really start to think about what the best foot forward was. So came up with this word fluxible. So when everything is in a state of flux, we are still able, we have to be flexible and make it up as we flow. This takes vision and resilience. Tired old thinking is not what we need for the fresh decade, for this is only the next normal. There'll be sessions like this that will be needed, I'm sure, in every decade in my working life. This is only the next normal, so it's time to be flexible. So what is the role of leadership in the 2020s, and what might that mean for me? What might it mean for the types of people we recruit? And for anyone that is planning or imagining to be in the world of work in the year 2030, what will it mean for recruiting new talent that has just currently had half of its school year homeschooled? What impact is that going to have on how we view, judge, recruit, select? What's it going to mean? So leadership, and you hear people saying about sort of climbing the ladder, a career ladder. So leadership used to be, I'm a leader, so I have a fixed place in an organisation. And I might say it in a very nice way, in a very empowering way, but basically, you do this because I'm the leader. What's starting to happen now is really clocking what does it mean to be agile, and what it kind of means to be agile is actually, rather than leadership being a fixed position in an organisation, maybe it's more of a fluid moment in time. If you happen to be the person sitting next to the emergency exit and a crisis kicks in, well, you are the one in that moment who is in the particular ephemeral moment in time to take the lead in that particular moment. So from a fixed place in an organisation, potentially leadership in the future is going to be a fluid moment in time. Why is that? Well, in the 1950s, it would have taken a month to send paperwork round for everyone to sign it off. Now we have automated systems that within a blink of a human eye will sign off some of these things. So everything has just sped up a little bit. So that means our leadership might speed up. It might not take me 10 years now to become a leader. I might have to lead before I even start the role if I'm then on a online meeting and I might need to interject on something. So from fixed to fluid. So let's just start to sort of pick apart then what might be some things that are worthwhile having a think. So in the old days, we had fixed, organised, static, hierarchical, keeping in line organisations, because that's how it worked. So you had a top team and then it kind of went through the layers, and then you had the people at the bottom. And the people at the top told the people at the bottom sort of what to do and how to keep safe and what decisions to make. So I tell you what to do. I invest in the things that we think are right. We update you on where we plan to go. Phrases like top-down communication, a bottom-up approach. For years, it's made me wince, that particular phrase. I just think it sounds so patronising and so reductive, because leaders in that old world controlled people to perform. Even the buildings we were in were representative of that kind of skyscraper approach, but they're empty now, those skyscrapers. In fact, 2 people in my family network who work in skyscrapers have been officially updated that they won't be going back for the rest of this year. Those skyscrapers are empty. What does that mean now in terms of my position within an organisation? Because actually, when you think about it, the till of the organisation, the money comes in or the money is saved at the bottom. They're the people who are taking the money or ensuring the money comes in through service or saving money, whatever it might be. So if we were to flip it in these new days and just consider, well, if it were more fluid, pop-up, moving, action-oriented, genuinely proactive, what does that then mean? Actually, rather than at the bottom and the top, you've got a back of house team who are there to support the front of house teams, because that's where the money comes in. So actually, maybe in the new days, we ask you at the back, we ask you at the front what to do. You know, you're eavesdropping far more on what the requirement is than we are. We listen to you, to what you spot as an opportunity. You update us so we can share across. That's our role. Back to front communication, a front to back strategy. Leaders control the framework to perform. Even when we're working now has completely changed. So asking ourselves the question, genuinely, how prepared am I to be flexible? because I might need to get over myself, and I might need to get over some of these ways of judging whether I was successful that year or not, and just flip it a little bit. Because one of the things that might be worth a flip is, how are we going to rate human performance in 2020 anyway? Typically, a leader, when they get newly recruited or internally promoted as a manager, going on a course to learn how to rate performance and judge, performance criteria is maybe one of those things that you kind of, go on. I've certainly run lots of those courses myself. But how are we going to rate it this year? Who's going to be able to prepare a like-for-like performance of September 2020 compared to September 2019? Surely any objective that was set pre-March this year is invalid. In a virtual world, what are you going to see in terms of how I've been anyway? So I think the whole thing about rating human performance is going to really be fluxed up a little bit, because typically large organisations would use a bell curve for an appraisal system. So not everyone can have an A, basically. We need to spread it all about. And then words like calibration would be what, would typically sort of happen. But let's just question our beliefs about success and performance. Does that therefore mean that success is not available for all? Is performance real, or is it just how am I going to present it? Because if you're unable to see me now at work, I'm going to tell you on our weekly update what I've been doing, but you haven't seen it. So basically, is it my ability to present it in that 30-minute update, as opposed to the 30 hours that you would have just unconsciously absorbed sharing an physical office with me? Is the ability therefore in abundance, or is it scarce? Because my beliefs about that are going to be influencing what I'm potentially looking out for. Because ultimately what that drives behaviour is, do I need to compete with my teammates or cooperate to keep safe and employed? So I think we have a real opportunity to shake up how we rate human performance, because how are you going to rate it anyway? You maybe haven't seen anyone, and you maybe all the objectives you were going to rate it against are invalid because there's been such a disruption. And in fact, words like machine and calibration are for machines. That's what we do with machines. You adjust to ensure its accuracy and precision to keep the machine running, so the machine of work running at certain standards. So maybe words like that are not fit for purpose in this new decade ahead, because wait until we see some of these new automation, artificial intelligences, automated systems that are able to transfer data to people without the need for any human intervention. Watch as we see some of these things come in. I was trying to look for some stats on what percentage of automated projects are kind of getting ramped up this year. I'm sure there are lots, but just hearsay. A friend of mine works for a legal company, and we had a really interesting conversation about how for years there'd been a project to automate certain part of the business, but it all just got sorted in May when it became apparent that it just needed to happen. So we're going to see, I think, some really interesting disruptive forces around just even the ability of rating human performance. What role in appraisal in this new decade ahead? Next disruptive sort of thinking is, how are we going to be a hands-on leader in a virtual workplace? Many organisations are planning that maybe this isn't just a one-off blip, that actually virtual work and a home-based working is going to be here for the longer term and may become a default. In fact, I'm speaking to a number of people with whom have smashed their sales targets being based at home because they've just been left to get on with it. There's been less disruption that can sometimes happen. And so could this all just basically boil down to the very simple concept of trust? Am I here to watch in on people and check they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? So as a leader, am I the CCTV of the organisation, or am I the binoculars? Am I here as the leader to watch out for people, to be an early warning system if there's something on the horizon, because I have a different perspective as the leader, that I'm then able to bring back in to watch out for people? Enter the book. So, the book in a nutshell: Humankind and the Fresh Perspective for Leadership. I'm unable to find sales figures on it, but it really has kind of created some ripples of interest and lots of PR around it. So let's have a look at 5 disruptive thoughts. Thought disruptor number 1. One of the things that really interested me about this book is about how our beliefs about the world influence potentially the type of leader that we then become. And I know that sounds like a very simple kind of, well, of course it does, we would know that already. But it's really fascinating when you stop and think about, are my beliefs that people are fundamentally good or not? Because that will really influence the position and the role and the reason why we have leaders in this new emerging virtual world. Because you know what people are like, don't you? Well, do we? Way back in the 17th century, Thomas Hobbes, so the Hobbesian approach to society is people fundamentally need looking after to protect themselves from the flaws and the impulses that humans have that potentially can get us into trouble. So the best way to look after a corporate, a body, whether that's a country, a nation, an organisation, is to put in systems in place to protect people from themselves. Whereas Rousseau was much more sort of libertarian in that actually people fundamentally are good. And the more you meddle with how people lead their lives, the more they will then kind of rebel and revolt, and that's what creates the issues. The other thing that Rutger Bregman said, which kind of really got me thinking, is sometimes systems are created by people who aren't necessarily typical of the masses. So there may be some people who put in some structures and processes and systems that are sort of designed to catch people based on their own imagination of what they would do if they were left with some kind of freedoms. So in terms of we know what people are like, well, do we? Because actually, are leaders there to prevent people to be bad, or are they there to help people to be good? And speaking as someone, I'm sure we all are, but I'm really passionate about health and safety and environment and wellbeing, but the health and safety stuff, this has really got me thinking about what role for health and safety leadership in the next decade as well. Because the impact that then has, rather than it just being a philosophical debate, is our beliefs will influence the type of actions and the facial expressions and the questions we ask when we are then kind of, you know, in behaviour mode. And placebo or nocebo, so you may have heard of the word placebo. Placebo is, if I think that pill is going to help me, then it probably will. So placebo is where your brain basically fires out all the various neurotransmitters that basically makes you feel better. So placebo is not nothing. It actually is such as the power that you think that's going to be good for you, that you make it good for you. Nocebo is the opposite, which is if I think that pill's going to kill me, as I have that pill, I will start to feel unwell, even if it actually contains no active ingredient. Such is the power of nocebo. I remember reading something in my psychology study, I mean, God, this is 22 years ago now, where the wrong patient at a hospital was read the last rites by a priest, and they died overnight. So the wrong patient was chosen, and because such was the belief that that patient suddenly thought, oh God, well, this really is my kind of last moment, that the patient didn't recover. So such is the power of nocebo and placebo. So this got me thinking, if I fundamentally think that people are on the whole kind of not to be trusted, my sense of dread as I return to work is going to be way up there. What this allowed me to think of is actually, on the whole, people are quite decent. So they'll be equally as nervous as me about doing something. So let's just relax about all of that dread and let's just crack on. Because actually, if I believe that most people want to get back to some sense of normality and work well together, then suddenly the placebo kicks in, which is I'm imagining the best and probably I'm therefore going to be then creating the best. So thought disruptor number one, do I think people are fundamentally good or bad? What does that mean in terms of leadership and my beliefs around work? That really got me thinking, because what if we just presumed everyone is performing until proved otherwise? Thought disruptor number two, people actually aren't as bad as we suspect, and suspecting people are bad warps our reality. But the challenge is that good deeds don't travel as fast as stories of bad deeds. This is the image that got me to read the book. William Golding's Lord of the Flies. So I kind of just assumed it was based on a real life story. I mean, it was part of the GCSE, everyone read it. Millions and millions and millions of people have read William Golding's Lord of the Flies, which was an act of fiction. So there was a fiction based on the film, and where basically all the lads all just start attacking each other and killing each other because left without leadership, left unwatched, they turn in on each other. But actually, in the New Scientist that I subscribed to, there was a book review of this book, Humankind, and it talked about the story of the real-life Lord of the Flies. And in 1965, a number of boys got trapped on a rocky Tongan atoll, no fresh water, 15 months. When eventually they got rescued, they had a tennis court they'd made, they had a gym. The first rule they made when they became shipwrecked was we will resolve conflict by separating people, sitting on one side of the island for 4 hours and the other side, and then we come back and we shake hands. That was the first rule they made about how to deal with conflict. How inspiring is that? They worked together so well that they kept the fire burning for 15 months. They took watch and they took turns in terms of doing that. They stayed fit and healthy, and they even set one of the lads' broken legs. The friendships have lasted a lifetime. So rather than trying to kill each other, which was the act of fiction, they actually then became lifelong friends in the trust. And of course, there's very few photos that emerged because they wouldn't have had a photo, but here are some of the real life Lord of the Flies. I tell you, if you need to be cheered up about human nature, just even reading that and then just realising, well, one is fiction, and of course it's so gory to read, you sort of, want to find out more. But actually the reality of it is if we were stuck on a desert island, we would probably crack on and make the best of it, but it wouldn't sell. So the suspecting people are bad kind of makes us more worried about things. So that's thought disruptor number 2. What if on the whole, my team, the team, our team, all want to work well together? What is getting in the way of the natural instinct of wanting to work together? Thought disruptor number 3. Unwatched humans are motivated deep down to cooperate rather than compete. And when you stop and think about it, it wouldn't make evolutionary sense if everyone was out to get each other. There's no way we would have achieved all the things that we've got if we weren't actually deep down, on the whole, motivated to cooperate rather than compete. It just wouldn't make sense. We would not be where we are now had we all just dog eat dog, fought each other to get to the top. It just wouldn't make sense. So this rocked my world. So here I am, mid-40s, really enjoyed my psychology degree 20 odd years ago, referenced it lots in training courses. I've even repeated some of the experiments very subtly to see how it kind of works. One of the things, just chatting with someone before we went online with this, is that what's really admirable about the author is that he talks about previous books he's written and how he now thinks differently. Well, this got me to think differently. Here we have a shot from the Stanford Prison Experiment, where this was in the 60s, 70s, and it was proof that human nature, when people are given either guard or prisoner uniforms, all hell breaks loose and they all want to start infighting and controlling each other. The Milgram social conformity, around about the same time, where people are sort of tricked basically into giving electric shocks to each other, again proved that deep down people are actually quite nasty and they'll do anything to have the excuse to kind of wreak havoc on someone else. The Kitty Genovese killing he talks about, which is where a young lady was murdered in New York, and apparently, X amount of people didn't bother to phone the police because everyone else assumes they had. I've mentioned these things on countless leadership workshops about, well, what can we do to then, prevent these things kind of happening? Actually, what the author does is he picks apart each of one of these in turn. The reality of it is they didn't all immediately start kicking off on each other. The other story he talks about is that so many of the guns in wars are never shot. The bayonets were never used. The vast majority of soldiers do what they can to not shoot that gun. In the First World War, many soldiers, according to they were able to go around the battlefield after and look, the gun was never shot. They just were continuously reloading and unloading to look like they were doing something. The vast majority of soldiers' guns are not shot because the actual act of killing is just goes against the grain of what it means to be human. How inspiring is that? Hence, that's why you need drones and more distance to then be able to cope with actually the horror of killing another human. So really, these experiments, when he's picked apart and he's kind of looked at the actual papers behind it, people were goaded to actually then start to hit each other and do all sorts of things with each other. The soldiers were drugged, they were incentivized, or whatever it would be. Actually, naturally, people don't want to compete and kill each other. On the whole, people actually want to live quite calmly with each other. So that really rocked me. And the reason why it rocked me is for decades, those experiments have been core reading in any A-level, on social psychology, any degree, etc. And what he calls is us to actually start to look at some of the stuff that wasn't published, or the experiments that didn't show that deep down we're all evil and we all want to kind of be nasty to each other. So what if people work better unwatched? Just let them alone. Maybe actually they will do what they can to make the best of a situation rather than need constant watching to ensure that everything's okay. The fourth thought disruptor Authority comes with a health warning. It can actually warp your personality. So the question, does a certain type of person become a leader, or does becoming a leader change you? I've had so many conversations over the years, I'm sure you have, with people who are best friends. One of them gets promoted and becomes the manager, and then suddenly it sort of starts to disrupt that friendship a little bit, or you have to really kind of work at it. This experiment that he talks about in the book just really stuck with me. So there are 5 cookies. There's 3 of you in a room. What would you do? How many cookies would you eat? The experimentees didn't realise they were being judged on the cookie eating. They thought they were being judged on the discussion. So Unwatched, really, this research were able to monitor the cookie eating. So all groups left 1 cookie, even the one that was adapted. I'll tell you in a sec. All groups left 1 cookie because that was just the social norm. When there was no one of those trio that had been signed a leader, so you are the leader, as they went into the room, 2 cookies would be left. So everyone would take 1 cookie and then they wouldn't have the others, because then it would be unfair because the third person wouldn't get their second cookie. But when one of those trio was kind of silently given the nod of you're the leader, they would then later on through the meeting help themselves to a second cookie. So they wouldn't eat 2 more, but they would help themselves to a second cookie. And they would leave loads of crumbs, much messier than the other 2 who weren't the leader, and much messier than averagely the 3 people when there was no assigned leader. So there's something about the position of I'm in the lead, I'm authority, that sort of turns us into a bit of a cookie monster. So we sort of in our minds think, oh, well, I'll take that 4th one because I'm the leader. And then something about our behaviour just means we become a little bit messier. There's almost an expectation that someone else is going to do our cleaning on our bidding. How fascinating is that? So what if leadership spoils my instinct to cooperate? Could it be worth me having a break from being a leader, just to remind myself what it's like to have 1 cookie every now and then? Because that might make me more of a mindful leader as and when I'm there by the emergency exit, needing to take some action. So thought disruptor number 5. He talks about this idea of the contact principle. And this really got me thinking about such a hot topic at the moment, inclusion. And could it be that just simply spending more time with each other is actually something that is in the gift of a leader to be able to organise? Because what he talks about is that there's a cost to empathy, which completely disrupted my thinking, because empathy is a good word. We want lots of empathy. But actually there's a cost to empathy, because the more I feel us, the less I feel them in that moment. The more I close in on a hug with you, the more excluding I am being to the person I'm not hugging. So in return for empathy, I'm excluding someone else. To be intimate and empathetic and having that one-to-one, at that point, I'm potentially excluding the needs of the other 3 people that are around me. So the power of a hug to include by excluding the rest of the world. Sharing similar stories around similar teams, it increases our connection, but it also increases our anger and our rage against the other departments who aren't doing what we're doing. Could it be that the best way to get the North and South teams together and to work not in silos, how often have we heard that word over the last decade, is just to have mixed meetings? Because if all I've ever been used to is a particular type of person, then when something new comes along, it's going to stand out. I'm not going to know what to think about it. Whereas if I've been used to all sorts, I'm just going to see it as a sweet, and that's the way I'm going to deal with it. Because the contact principle is who I have the most contact with is who I feel most comfortable with and who I feel a natural rapport with. So to keep me wide-minded, maybe as we start to emerge into this new decade, I make an intentional effort to have as much random interaction as possible, especially as we've been so closed. We need to come together to remain wide-minded. So what if leadership is about reminding me to look up and mix every now and then? Because I might get so busy and absorbed in what I'm doing. Maybe the best leader I could have in this next decade is someone that reminds me to look up and mix. Otherwise, I'm going to get ever so absorbed and fixated on the particular thing that I'm working now. So Humankind It's been a bestseller, and I can absolutely see why. Many people have found this book to be inspiring, hopeful and timely. I saw a description on a review of Amazon as uplifting, and I thought, what a fantastic word to summarise that. We've been locked down. This is uplifting. Just the message that you might need, like I needed at the time, just to kind of get a bit more energy kind of back. So if you're a reader, fill your boots. If you're not a reader, these are the 5 things that I sort of thought might be useful to have a think about, because tired old thinking is not what we need for the fresh decade. The exciting thing about being an agile leader is you get to move around more. The stretching thing for being an agile leader is this is in all directions. You might have to bend and stretch in some ways that you think, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this at the age I'm at. Well, we might have to all just be agile in some new directions. It's time to get flexible. So some food for thought as we are starting to erect some new pillars of how we're going to work in the decade ahead. These beauties have been here for 5,000 years. So look what we can do when we really work together and cooperate. So how could we put this food for thought for bringing this to life? Could you have open invitations to different team meetings? So we bob around and swap a little bit, up that contact principle. Could we share some stories of unusual career paths that connect and inspire? Not everyone has gone up the rungs of the ladder in this kind of set way. So could we connect and inspire, especially with emerging talent, about different ways to make your way around a corporate, a body, an organisation? Maybe it's a real opportunity for me to challenge my beliefs. Do I know that for sure? What do I think about people? Do I leave them alone, or do I think they're going to muck about? What's actually my belief? Can people be trusted on their own? Asking the least likely people for advice and ideas. So if you're towards the back of an organisation in charge of resource, make sure you fly around to the front every now and then, because they'll be eavesdropping on what will be the needs and the trends, etc., far more than maybe what we can read in a paper. Unprecedented, liberated more like. What an opportunity to set some new precedents and to be as wide-minded as possible. Go diverse as life unlocks. Leaders listen. We're listening on behalf of the organisation, the binoculars, and maybe taking a break from leadership. Could that make me a better leader in the long run if I actually take a break and remind myself what it's like to be in the team, so then I'm even more mindful as a leader when I then am by that emergency exit? And just imagine how much easier it would be to sleep if we had trust as the default. How would you prepare for the next meeting? So here we are at the end of webinar 23, Humankind. It's rocked my world. I hope this has given you a little bit of a soupçon, some things to have a think about. So I wish you well, and we'll see you at the next one, where we will be looking at The Obstacle is the Way. So that is book number 2. So see you soon. Thank you, everyone. Stay flexible.